I'm Teresa Weekly, and this is Unashamed. We're at a park today. It's nice to have the kids around, enjoying it's not really that warm, but it's sunny. And in West Michigan, we kind of take what we can get, right? I have Erica with me, who is part of a group called Al-Anon. We're like, might as well not be here, right? Which is kind of appropriate, since this is an anonymous group, a group of anonymous members that you work with, which is one reason we won't give her last name. But I have talked a lot in this podcast about losing my sister and some of the support groups that are available to help people who might have family members or other loved ones who are struggling with mental health issues or addiction, and often those two go hand in hand. And that was the case with my sister too. I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, but she struggled with both a lot, and both kind of fueled the other. Each kind of fueled the other. So since I've talked about these different groups that are available, including Al-Anon, I wanted to give a better understanding of the kind of support that people might find in these groups. You've been involved with Al-Anon, as we've talked before, for more than 10 years, 15 years?
So, for the purposes of this conversation, like, Al-Anon members generally don't disclose how long they've been in Al-Anon.
Oh, okay.
And there's a reason for that. It's because I've been to meetings where people said, like, the person in the room with the most recovery is the one who got up earliest that morning. Because this is a program that we do one day at a time. So I have been coming for a long time. And I will say, I started going to Al-Anon in my early 20s, and now I'm in my early 40s. So you can do the math on that.
Okay.
But also, everybody recovers at their own pace and comes for their own reasons. So it's really important to know that, I just do this one day at a time. So I'm going to go to a meeting tonight, and that's going to be the meeting that I have today. And that's going to be a part of my recovery just for today. So that's kind of how we have perspective on that in Al-Anon.
You hear that in life a lot, that you only have this moment. You can't live in the past. You can't live in the future. So it seems kind of appropriate that that's how the approach would be.
Yeah, it's actually one of the beautiful things about Al-Anon is it's something that we practice together in our meetings, and we have relationships with each other that are like Al-Anon friendships, but we also have something called sponsorship. So Al-Anon is a 12-step recovery program, and the one that most people are probably familiar with is Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. And people have sponsors that have gone through the 12 steps of recovery, and we have that in Al-Anon too. So I have a sponsor, I am a sponsor, and those relationships remind me, like, I can call my sponsor, like, freaking out about something that might happen in 2 months, and she'll be like, okay, how can you take care of yourself today? What can you do for yourself right now? So a lot of our program reminds us to come back to this moment where we do have power and control, because alcoholism is scary, right? It's just so scary. I think I started coming to Al-Anon because I loved people who had problems with drinking. Drinking bothered me, your family members and friends, and there's a lot of people in my life who struggle with alcoholism. And I just want to say, I know you and I talked about this before, but some of the people in my life also use other substances. They use street drugs or pills, or even were workaholics or disordered eating or things like that.
Addiction.
Right, just sort of addictive mentality or behavior. In Al-Anon, we talk about alcoholism, but understand that we call it like the family disease. It comes with a bunch of other stuff. So a part of the way that I was affected by alcoholism is in my family growing up, both of my parents were adult children of alcoholics, and there's a lot of disease and dysfunction in my family around that. There were a lot of secrets. There was a lot of abuse. There's a lot of stuff that came with it. So we talk about, that I don't get to decide if you belong in Al-Anon. That's up to you to decide. But the only requirement for membership is the problem of alcoholism in a relative or friend. That's somebody's drinking bothers me, basically. So maybe
Is it just drinking, or could it be any addiction?
It can be. It's up to you, really. You get to decide that. In Al-Anon, we talk about alcoholism, but like I said, when I rolled up to my first meeting, I was like, yeah, my loved one's drinking bothers me, but honestly, she's high on drugs all the time. I'm afraid she's gonna get arrested or caught with this stuff. It's nobody told me that I didn't belong because that was what I was worried about. Because the truth is, and this is what it took me a long time to recognize, was that I was in recovery for myself. And that is a part of, like, the hard thing about alcoholism is when we love somebody whose drinking bothers us or whose drugging scares us or something. Like, all of our focus goes on that person, right? Like, because usually their behavior leads to death. I mean, it's scary stuff. They're doing things that, like, end up in jail or the hospital or some kind of mental health institution or something. You know, it's scary, scary stuff. So I found myself, like, putting everything in my life on hold. Like, you know, I can go back to school when I figure out how to get this person sober, or I can finally be happy when I fix this. I can, you know, be a better daughter, a better partner, a better, you know, when I figure out this problem and how to make it better. Yeah.
So this isn't a group that's going to help you figure out how to change this person or fix this person. This is a group that's going to help you figure out how to manage your life.
So, short answer, yes. And also, the interesting thing about it is that we have, like, this opening and closing that we read at every meeting that talks a little bit about what we do in Al-Anon. And one of them says, like, the family situation is bound to improve as we apply the Al-Anon ideas. And the Al-Anon ideas are basically like, I take care of myself, keep the focus on myself and my recovery, become willing to recognize that I didn't cause this disease in someone else. I can't control this disease in someone else. And I can't cure this disease in someone else. But I can do things that contribute to making it worse. Like, I can. I've heard people say in meetings, like, I never made them drink, but I sure made them thirsty. And that's true. Like, I have to begin to recognize, like, what's my part in the chaos that's happening around me? Because I have one. I'm not making the people around me drink, and I can't make them stop drinking. But I can do things that are more loving for myself and for other people. And that's something that we learned in Al-Anon.
One reason I wanted to talk about addiction, in the first 5 episodes of this podcast, I've really focused on suicide, which, that's been the focus of my family's life for the last year since we lost my sister. But addiction being such a big part of that, a lot of the things that we've been working through have to do with her addiction, her behavior, and enabling that behavior. And a lot of the decisions that I made and other family members made that I've questioned had to do with, I don't want to enable her behavior. And we talked about that in my family, like setting boundaries and not enabling, but then feeling so guilty because after the fact you think, well, this happened because I pushed her away, when really it was about setting boundaries. So it's created a lot of questions for us, and I think we're working through those, but I wanted to discuss enabling so that people maybe who do have a loved one who's struggling, whether it's with addiction or mental illness, can understand what it means to what the difference is between enabling and helping or being unhelpful.
Yeah.
And how to set those boundaries.
I think it's important to say, first of all, that, like, Al-Anon is a non-professional program. So if you come to an Al-Anon meeting, it's going to be a bunch of people like you who've had an experience of loving somebody whose drinking bothers them. There isn't a therapist in the room. They might be just a member. Nobody's leading. Somebody that day is going to chair the meeting, but the next time it might be somebody else. They rotate that service position. So really what people do is share their own experience, strength, and hope about what it's like to live with this disease. So, like, words like enabling are kind of clinical terms, right? They're things that people talk about in therapy. And we talk a lot about how to detach in a healthy way, how to recognize, like, the first step in Al-Anon is the same as the first step in AA. Step 1 is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. And I've had people tell me, like, why do you go to that program? Like, you don't have a problem. And I do. I have a problem admitting that I'm powerless over this. Like, I think there's something I should be able to do. Like, and I have shared my first steps is kind of the story about how I came to Al-Anon, and I've talked in different settings about that. And a part of my first step story is that I did all of the things to help somebody else, and then I did the opposite of all of the things. So, I
like drinking with them, taking away alcohol, driving them, taking that kind of thing.
Keeping secrets, telling everybody, doing everything I could, and then the opposite of everything I could, and it didn't work because for me, I was unable to recognize like an appropriate role in that person's life. And Al-Anon is a spiritual program, so a lot of our steps talk about a higher power or a God. And a part of that, I'm not a person who ascribes to any particular religion, so that was a little bit uncomfortable for me at first. But what was really helpful for me in that process of adapting like this spiritual nature of this program is I recognize like I'm not God. And I had been taking a lot of actions in my loved one's life that were like the things that God should do, or maybe something that a doctor should do, or a therapist, or a spiritual advisor, or somebody that wasn't me. I thought that I had to take power because nobody else was, and that was a desperation that came from love. Like I saw this person suffering, and I was like, nobody cares. Nobody sees this. Like we have to stop this. I'm gonna die of this. I was terrified, right? Like I took a lot of actions based on fear, and so my actions couldn't be based on love as much. And one of the traditions we have in Al-Anon is that like we have this singular purpose in our program. It's to help families of alcoholics, period. And then we do that by welcoming newcomers, by working the 12 steps, that program of recovery ourselves. And then the other part of it is by giving understanding and encouragement to our alcoholic loved ones. And that's so hard to do when we think that we should be fixing something. Like we just see them as a problem. Like there's something I need to be solved, you're wrong and bad, I gotta fix you, you're not right. And that gets in the way of me actually having meaningful, loving, supportive relationships. So that was a lot of words about this, but when you think about enabling and boundaries, like for me it started with recognizing that I was trying to do some stuff that was never mine to do. My job was to love, accept, support, understand this person, and I couldn't. I had so much anger and fear, and I just got in the way of everything. So practically speaking, like I would go to meetings and people would talk about stuff. I remember like my home group when I first started going was in an old church basement in Holland, and there was this gent there who's since passed on, and he used to read the same misquote, actually the same thing from one of our books every single meeting. And he would say, well, time silence can give you command of the situation as nothing else can. And that was not an accurate quote, but it was the first thing I tried. Like people would share stuff like I did this and it was helpful to me, so I went home and I shut up, because I usually said words with my alcoholic loved ones or everybody in my life. Like they would say something to me and I would respond. Like actually I would react. I would say things back. I'd get very defensive. I would justify my actions. I would argue. I would explain things to them. I would try to talk them into things and reason things out with people. And like if you've ever been in a relationship with somebody who's drinking or drugging, even when they're not drinking or drugging, they're still not sober. Like you can't have a conversation with them in the way that you want to. So I practiced shutting up, which is something I'd never done. You might be able to tell that I'm a person who likes to talk. And it wasn't the silent treatment. It was like, I'm going to just stop a minute and not react to this. And everything changed in my home when I did that. Like everything changed. Like I began to have conversations that were less combative and volatile. It was just one small thing. And there were lots of times in my life where I used to get a lot of 2 a.m. phone calls from people who were drunk or high and needed my help, loved ones, friends, and I would take them always, and I would worry, and like sometimes those phone calls would end badly, and sometimes I didn't know what to do. And I remember listening to someone in a meeting who said, I learned to shut my phone off at 10 p.m. because, my loved one couldn't stop calling me, and I value myself enough to get this sleep. And really, like, that is a lot of what I learned about having boundaries rather than setting boundaries. Like, boundaries for me in recovery are based on me. Like, I should be able to have a boundary without having somebody else's name in my mouth, because it's not about like what you do. Like, Teresa, you cannot drink at this party because you'll get drunk. You cannot do that. It's about like, well, if Teresa drinks, then I am going to call an Uber. I'm going to take care of myself, right? So I have an idea going into this, and I can talk to Teresa about it, but I don't have to. I just know for myself that I don't give cards to people who are drinking. I don't argue with people who are drunk. I don't answer my phone after 10 p.m. because I value my sleep enough to make sure that I get it. And when I do that stuff and I put the focus on myself and I take care of myself, I don't spend all of my time obsessing and resenting other people. And I wake up refreshed because I valued myself, and I can have a conversation with my loved ones whose drinking bothers me, and I can not constantly react to them. So it's like these little tiny changes that people talked about over and over, little sayings, little things they did that I could take and use myself. And one of the core principles of recovery in Al-Anon is that I get to take what I like and leave the rest. So maybe Teresa shares something that like, no, that doesn't really apply to me, or I would never do that. Okay, I don't have to. I don't do it. I just do the things that seem like they would be helpful to me.
I know going to a support group, whether it's Al-Anon or Narcan or NAMI, these different groups, I was recommended to do that before my sister died, and I wish I had, but there is kind of a block for people who've never done it, even as not being the person who has the mental illness or who has the addiction. It's still like, it's a scary thing. I don't know. It's maybe it's for me and my own nature. Like, if I haven't done it before, it's a little scary because I've done it before, so I don't really know what to expect, and like getting over that hurdle of just making the decision and going. So what would you say to someone who's thought about it or who's been told you should maybe try this, it would help you, but they just can't get over that mental block to do it?
So I've heard lots of stories from lots of different people about how they ended up in Al-Anon, and sometimes, they had to hear from 18 different people that they should go first. And I've heard people say, like, I drove to the parking lot, and then I drove home, and I drove to the parking lot, and walked up the door, and then I drove home. And I did that like 8 times, and for me, like, I had a parent that was in Al-Anon when I was a kid, so I knew what it was, and I was still really terrified. And a part of it for me is like, it's the vulnerability of admitting that I need help. Really, that is what it was for me. It's like really, really admitting, shit, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this. I need somebody to help me with it. And I don't have answers. I like being a person with answers. It feels comfortable when I have answers. If I don't have answers, I feel scared. I feel uncertain. And I honestly, like, even though I had this parent that was in Al-Anon, and I had gone to Al-Anon meetings when I was a kid, I colored under the table. I knew what it was. I still I got distracted. Somebody just fell on the table.
The camera jumped, that's why. It's nice to have so many people around.
It is. I don't mind it at all. I still had this idea that, I was going to go there, and there was going to be someone in charge, and they were going to tell me what to do. And I think for a lot of people, like, you're talking about how it's kind of hard to get to the point where you can go to your first meeting. I think the second one is almost hard. I realized, I need to do this. I got to show up again for myself. I got to do this. This is going to be just the thing I check out one time. If anybody watching this is not sure about or want to do this, it doesn't hurt to try. We always tell group, like, try 6 different meetings before you decide whether or not Al-Anon is right for you. Every single one has a little different flavor. Some of them now are just virtual fully, some of them are in person, some of them have lots of young people, some of them have lots of old timers. There's lots of different stuff. So
do what you wish your kids would do and just try it.
Right? What else can you say? Exactly.
Well, I will say that talking to you, even the several times that we've talked has really helped me. And maybe it's like third-party affirmation. You hear something, and then you hear it again in a different way, and it's like, oh, okay. Like for me, feeling guilty about I should have done this, I could have done this. You start to realize, like you said, you can't. They're going to do what they're going to do, and you're not going to be able to, whether you take away their keys or give them a ride, they're going to find a way to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And even though I'd heard that several times before, I don't know, I begin to feel it more. So thank you for that. And for anyone who's thinking about going to a meeting like this or finding a support group, I so much
just imagine sitting in a room and having it happen 12 times in a row, as many times a week as you want it to happen. It's a really beautiful, powerful thing, and this is absolutely true. I don't say this with any sense of hyperbole or irony or anything. Al-Anon saved my life. Like, I think about some things that I've been through in my life, and I'm like, I'm here today, and I'm alive, and I have a fulfilling life, meaningful relationships with other people because of this program.
Well, we'll list the national website and the local website for West Michigan, if you're listening or watching in West Michigan, in the details of this episode, so you can check that out there. And even if you just go to the national website, you can click to find local chapters near you, and you can find out if they're doing virtual meetings, in-person meetings, and how to get involved. So thank you so much, Erica.
Thanks, Teresa.
Take an upstream approach to mental health with the Be Nice Action Plan. Empower yourself and others with knowledge and resources. Empower yourself with protective factors, the people, places, and activities that keep us mentally healthy. Do you have safe and positive coping skills you can rely on to get you through a difficult time period? Practice mentally healthy habits, exercise, have a balanced diet, get enough sleep, and avoid harmful substances. Have resources, like the Suicide Prevention Lifeline or the Crisis Text Line. Learn more about each step of the action plan at benice.org.